Water is the weight of a heavy sledgehammer in your hand when you have to carry it, and it is the ghost of a memory when the well runs dry. Most folks look at the sky and see weather, but when you're standing on a parched acre of dirt in the high plains of Wyoming or the scrublands of Texas, you start to see the atmosphere for what it actually is, a massive, invisible ocean. There are over 30,000 trillion gallons of fresh water floating right above your head at any given moment. It is a river that never stops flowing, and it does not care about property lines or utility companies. The goal here isn't to build a billion-dollar desalination plant. We are looking for a way to pull enough liquid from the air to keep a garden green and a family hydrated using $50 and the basic laws of physics. It starts with the understanding that every breath you take is wet. Even in the middle of a July heat wave in Kansas, where the air feels like a physical weight against your chest, there is moisture. To get it, you do not need electricity, you need a temperature differential. Think about a cold glass of sweet tea sitting on a porch table in Georgia. Within 3 minutes, the outside of that glass is dripping. That is the atmosphere giving up its cargo because it hit a surface colder than the dew point. Our mission is to scale that glass of tea up into a permanent, passive structure made of stone, earth, and common hardware store finds. We are building an atmospheric well, a tool for the long haul that relies on the thermal mass of the ground and the predictable cooling of the night. It is a quiet revolution. There are no humming motors or flickering screens, just the sound of a shovel hitting rocky soil and the steady, rhythmic drip of condensation hitting the bottom of a collection basin. This is about taking the most basic human need and moving it from a monthly bill to a physical asset you own. The first system we have to master is the earth tube condenser. It is a simple concept that uses the fact that the ground 6 feet down stays at a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. You start by digging a trench. It should be at least 30 feet long and 4 feet deep, angled slightly toward your collection point. You're looking for a length of 4-inch diameter corrugated drainage pipe, the kind you find in the back of any big box hardware store for about $25. This pipe is light, flexible, and smells like fresh plastic and dust. As you lay it in the trench, you feel the weight of the damp earth against your boots. You bury this pipe, leaving one end exposed to the windward side of your property, capped with a fine mesh screen to keep out the field mice and the heavy-bodied June bugs that swarm the porch lights in summer. The air enters that pipe at maybe 95 degrees. As it travels through the cool darkness of the earth, the temperature drops rapidly. By the time that air reaches the far end of the pipe, it has hit the dew point. The moisture that was once a gas turns into heavy, clear droplets that cling to the plastic ribs of the pipe. Gravity takes over from there. The water trickles down the slope of the tube and empties into a food-grade 5-gallon bucket buried at the lowest point. When you pull the lid off that bucket, the smell is clean, like the first rain after a long drought. You are harvesting water from the thermal inertia of the planet itself. It is a slow process, maybe a quart or two a day depending on the humidity, but it is consistent. It works while you sleep, and it works while you're working the back 40. The second system is the stone cairn dew collector, a method as old as the hills of the Mediterranean but adapted for a modern backyard. This is where those stacks of thermal mass bricks or rough field stones come into play. You're looking for high-density materials. If you have a pile of limestone or even old concrete chunks from a demolished sidewalk, you have the bones of a water plant. You build a cone-shaped pile about 4 feet high with a hollow center. The stones should be roughly the size of a grapefruit, heavy in the hand and cool to the touch even in the afternoon sun. Between the stones, you leave small gaps, little lungs that allow the night air to circulate through the heart of the pile. As the sun sets over the jagged horizon of the Rockies, the stones begin to radiate their heat back into the black sky. Because stone is dense, it loses heat much slower than the surrounding air. By 2 in the morning, the air temperature has plummeted, but the stones remain a few degrees warmer. Then, as the dawn approaches, the process reverses. The air warms up quickly, but the stones stay chillingly cold. The morning air, thick with the dampness of the pre-dawn hours, hits those cold stones and collapses. The water beads up on the rough surfaces, glistening like diamonds in the first light of the sun. It runs down the faces of the rocks, gathering speed, and drains into a simple galvanized steel trough at the base. This isn't a high-speed tap. It is a deliberate, patient gathering. You can see the moisture clinging to the moss that starts to grow in the cracks of the stones, a deep, vibrant green that stands out against the dusty brown of the yard. This system costs nothing if you have the rocks on your land. If you don't, a few bags of heavy landscape stone will set you back $20. You are leveraging the weight of the earth to fight the dryness of the sky. Each drop represents a tiny bit of independence. When you combine the underground cooling of the pipe with the surface area of the stone cairn, you're creating a microclimate designed for one specific purpose: survival. You feel the grit of the stone on your palms and the sweat on your brow as you stack the final layer. There is a profound satisfaction in building something that requires no fuel and no maintenance. You aren't just a consumer anymore. You are a producer. You are someone who understands that the environment isn't something to be conquered, but something to be channeled. The wind that whistles through the gaps in your stone pile is now your employee. The cool dark of the trench is your warehouse. You stand back and look at the structure. It's humble. It's a pile of rocks and a buried pipe. But when the heat of August arrives and the local water district starts talking about restrictions and shortages, your bucket will still be catching the quiet, steady rhythm of the atmosphere giving up its treasure. You are living sovereign, one drop at a time. The third system moves from the ground to the vertical plane, utilizing the aerial fog fence, a design that mimics the way the redwood forests of the Pacific Northwest drink from the literal air. You're looking for a simple frame, perhaps built from 2x4s of untreated Douglas fir, or even sturdy cedar posts salvaged from an old fence line. The smell of the cedar is sharp and resinous as you notch the wood to create a rectangular frame standing 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide. Across this frame, you stretch a double layer of high-density polyethylene mesh, the kind of black shade cloth you find in any garden center for about $15. It feels like a stiff, synthetic fabric, rough against your fingertips. You secure it with heavy-duty galvanized staples, ensuring the tension is tight enough to hum when the wind catches it. In the high deserts of Nevada or the rolling hills of the Appalachians, the wind is a constant traveler, carrying microscopic droplets of water that are too light to fall as rain. As this moist air passes through the mesh, the tiny filaments of the plastic snag the water. These microscopic beads collide with one another, merging into larger, heavier globes of liquid. You can stand there in the gray light of a misty morning and watch the transformation. The black mesh begins to shimmer as if it were woven with silver thread. Once the droplets reach a critical mass, the weight of a single grain of long-grain rust, they succumb to gravity. They slide down the mesh in narrow, wandering rivulets, eventually dropping into a horizontal PVC gutter zip-tied to the bottom of the frame. This gutter, a simple 3-inch white tube, is capped at one end and tilted just enough to let the harvest flow toward a central downspout. The sound is a delicate pitter-patter, a liquid percussion that signals the success of the system. This fog fence can pull several gallons a day in the right conditions, especially during the humid transitions of spring and autumn. It is a vertical acre of harvesting potential compressed into a footprint of only a few inches. You're catching the hidden rain that most people never even realize is there. When you combine this with the earth tube and the stone cairn, you're no longer relying on a single source of luck. You have created a multi-layered net that spans the ground, the subsurface, and the sky. The synergy of these three systems creates what we call the hydrological battery. The $50 you spent on plastic pipe, mesh, and a few buckets has bought you a biological insurance policy. To make this truly functional for a homestead, you must focus on the storage and the long cool effect. You take those 55-gallon blue barrels, the heavy, industrial-grade plastic containers that once held food-grade vinegar or syrup, and you bury them deep in the shade of a north-facing wall. You wrap them in an inch of foam insulation or a thick layer of dry straw to keep the water at that steady 55 degrees. Cold water stays fresh longer. It resists the growth of algae and the stagnation that plagues store-bought tanks sitting in the sun. As you connect the various collection lines into your central cistern, you realize the plumbing is as simple as a garden hose and a few brass fittings. There is no pressurized pump to fail, no circuit board to fry in a lightning storm. You are using the slope of your land to move the water. You feel the cool dampness of the pipes as you bury them under a few inches of mulch and wood chips, protecting them from the ultraviolet rays of the sun and the occasional morning frost. The system is silent, hidden, and incredibly durable. It is built to outlast the person who dug the trenches. Now comes the implementation, the actual work of turning this harvested moisture into life. You don't just drink this water, you use it to create a hydric oasis. Around the base of your stone cairn and near the exit of your earth tube, you plant high-value perennials. Think of the elderberry bush with its hollow stems and clusters of dark, tart berries that smell like the deep woods. Think of the comfrey plant with its massive, hairy leaves that act as biological pumps, drawing minerals from deep in the soil. These plants thrive on the waste moisture that overflows from your buckets. They create a micro-canopy that shades the ground, further reducing evaporation and keeping the soil temperature low. You spend your Saturday afternoon with a heavy iron rake, smoothing the soil around your structures. The dirt is cool and gets under your fingernails, a reminder of the physical connection between the laborer and the land. You aren't just building a gadget, you're managing an ecosystem. You look at the average Joe neighbor who spends his weekends fighting a yellowing lawn with a chemical sprayer and a soaring utility bill, and you realize you're playing a different game. You're playing the long game. Your system costs the price of a modest steak dinner, but its return on investment is measured in decades of security. When the wind picks up and the weather vane on the barn starts to spin, you don't worry about the drying effect of the breeze. You know that every gust is just more fuel for your fog fence. When the sun beats down with a relentless, punishing glare, you know your earth tubes are deep in the cool, dark embrace of the soil, quietly condensing the humidity of the afternoon. This is the essence of sovereign living. It is the transition from being a victim of the climate to being a participant in its cycles. You have taken a $50 bill and converted it into a permanent fountain. You walk back toward the house as the shadows lengthen across the yard. The air is starting to turn crisp, and you can smell the wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. You stop by the buried cistern and lift the lid. The reflection of the rising moon dances on the surface of the water you caught today. It is clear, cold, and entirely yours. No one can turn it off. No one can tax it. No one can contaminate it without your knowledge. It is the purest form of wealth. You take a ladle, dip it into the deep, dark reservoir, and drink. The water tastes of nothing. No chlorine, no metallic tang of old city pipes, just the clean, neutral reality of the atmosphere. This is the path to independence. It isn't found in a bunker or a mountain of gold. It is found in the ability to provide for your most basic needs using the materials under your feet and the air in your lungs. You have built an atmospheric well. You have mastered the physics of the dew point and the thermal mass of the stone. You are a producer, a steward, and a free man. You stand on your own land, under your own sky, and you drink from your own well. This is how we live. This is how we remain sovereign.